unleashing female power.
Being a disruptor.
I'm always constantly telling the truth.
I love
art. That's all her life.
She's alive and female.
Being a woman, what it meant.
Prove him wrong.
Girls run the world.
We're rocking the place.
Welcome to the Art Pod. I'm your host, Carolina, and I'll be your guide through this Pandora's box. Strap yourselves in for a journey through the art world where we bring you candid conversations, untold stories, uncover industry secrets, and celebrate the women who are shaping its future. Because in the Art Pod, the spotlight is always on the girls. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Art Pod. My guest today is YuJune Park. Welcome. So a little bit about YuJune. She is a partner at Synoptic Office, an award-winning design consultancy that works globally with leading cultural, civic, and business organizations to communicate ideas, build experiences, and cultivate new audiences. With over a decade of experience in creative direction, graphic design, and digital strategy, she leads the studio's vision and practice, transforming data into knowledge for diverse clients and contexts. She's an associate professor of communication design at Parsons School of Design, where she teaches and researches global scripts, archives, and the manifold ways design can unlock human stories and reveal connections through language and information. Park's work has been recognized by Fast Company Innovation, by Design, the Webby's Design Week, the Arts Directors Club, and the American Institute of Graphic Arts. She speaks and exhibits internationally, most recently at the Biennale of Design in Ljubljana, the Ningbo Museum of Art in China, and at Palazzo Mora in collaboration with the European Cultural Center and the Venice Biennale. In 2022, Park was selected for Creative Review's Creative Leaders List, which celebrates global leaders advancing in the field. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I want to get started with your work at Synoptic, because you were the co-founder along with Casper Lamb. Synoptic, which is an award-winning design consultancy, and you've been doing that for about 12 years. So let's start with a little bit about Synoptic. Tell us.
Sure. Synoptic Office, we're a design studio based here in New York City, and we really see design as connecting and communicating ideas to humans in meaningful ways. And design can do that through digital strategy, through digital products, through print media, but we really see ourselves as being thought partners to institutions, helping them figure out how we can connect in meaningful ways to other people.
Great. And what made you want to open up your own design firm?
You know, I was working full time when we started Synoptic Office. I was at a studio called Base Design, and we actually started Synoptic Office because we wanted to have a space to kind of try innovative ideas that weren't restricted by client demands. It was a space for us to test ideas about design, to write about design. And we started putting projects out there. We started getting commissions. And before we knew it, it kind of blew up into a full-fledged studio.
Yeah, you work with a ton of clients, especially in the art world, like the Met, the Guggenheim, obviously Magazino Italiano, which is where we met, Neue Gallery, and that's just to name a few. Can you tell us a little bit more how you approach designing for the art world entities as opposed to luxury brands or different markets?
Sure. Maybe I can start with similarities and then go into differences. I think both, like all design, right? It's like we're designing for people with an elevated palette, a visual palette. I think all people want to use design to help with their storytelling, cultural building. I think the differences are with cultural institutions, they are mission-driven organizations, and primarily with museums, their goal is to preserve knowledge and then share it with the widest possible audience. And so it's a different goal that's just beyond selling things. And so for us, when we work with cultural institutions, we often start very early on in the design process as thought partners. So, for example, one of our clients is Carnegie Hall. So we launched a project with them called the Timeline of African American Music. And we started with that project from the beginning. And so really thinking about how can design activate knowledge. Their mission is to share knowledge with the widest possible audience and to serve the public good. And so we were there to kind of talk through the options all the way to what type of platforms, what type of message, what type of technology. And it's the same for museums, a lot of times we're brought on because they have huge collections and they want to show it to the world. But these collections are like housed on these servers and nobody can actually see the work. And the funny thing about museums is like the vast majority of their collections are being housed in these special warehouses and nobody is really seeing them. And what they want is to get these collections out into the world. And so we work with them as thought partners to kind of figure out how to unlock the information in them in a way that's not overly academic, but still honors the research behind the work. So we're really trying to find ways to tell the stories around the work so that when somebody goes to the museum, they can also understand the context behind it. There's the emotional experience of seeing art, but now there's all these different ways you can also learn about the art. It's social and political context. And so you can have a deeper engagement with the works.
So I want to touch a little bit on Magazino because we worked directly on that project together, and I forgot how long it took. Was it like 1.5 years or 2 years almost?
Yeah, almost 2 years.
Yeah, where we were like developing the website literally from start to finish and, doing the migration and things like that. So I kind of wanted to maybe from your end talk about how that kind of process starts, like on the back end, from like developing the concept to actually going through the actual development to then realizing the final product.
Yeah, I mean, we just feel so lucky to have worked with Magazino, and obviously you were amazing there and brought so much vision to the project. And what we love about Magazino and what's so unique about it is that you have exhibitions all around the world. So you are based in Cold Spring, New York, but you are truly a borderless institution. And Magazino has this like big vision for sharing art povera with the world. And so what we were excited about is that you not only have exhibitions, not just in Cold Springs, but satellite exhibitions. You also publish and you commission films about the work. And we found that to be so extraordinary because as a museum, you're also sort of a publishing house. And so for us, it was a really amazing challenge because we wanted the website to be a way to kind of support this vision of being a borderless institution, that for every one person that can make it to Cold Spring, you might have 1,000 people come to the website. And so being able to tie that physical experience of going to the museum with all this extraordinary research that Magazino was doing. And so we ended up creating a website that's an e-reader, kind of a video player, and a museum website all in one. And what we did was we linked the exhibitions with the writing, with the films, so that you could see kind of the breadth of the research and the publishing that comes out around every exhibition. And people can kind of learn all about the artworks in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, I absolutely loved. And I think it was nominated for the interactive category for the website.
Design Week Awards. It was published on everywhere.
Yeah.
So
I always hear compliments about the website, and I love the way that it functions also visually, because you can really get a sense of art community and research. So that was a really, really fun project. But I also wanted to touch on the fact that you were also, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording this episode, how you were, I think you mentioned mission-based or something like that, with because you've been doing so much with social justice institutions.
Yeah, so recently GD USA recognized Synoptic Office as being like a mission-driven studio. And the reason is because we work so much with cultural institutions and educational institutions. And we realized over time, the vast majority of our projects have actually been for social good. So it's about unlocking stories around art. It's about disseminating knowledge. It's about working with archives in new ways. And so, or even creating learning, all the way to creating learning platforms. And so, yeah, that's just been a new thing that's happened for our office.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Thank you.
What made you want to work with art institutions?
I'm as a designer, obviously, we're huge fans of art. If I was more talented in that direction, my dream would have been to be an artist. But I think it happened for several different reasons. I think one was when I was at Base Design, I did tons of work for cultural institutions. Like we did a lot of work for MoMA, the Davis Museum. And then simultaneously, Casper was working at Art Store at the time. And Art Store is sort of the home of all the digital artwork images online. And it has now merged with JSTOR. And so he had this extensive knowledge in cataloging and how kind of cataloging worked online, how huge collections of data basically worked in the arts. And when we started Synoptic Office, it just was like a natural kind of fit for us to work with cultural institutions. And one of our first big clients was Carnegie Hall. And I think the reason they hired us was because they needed somebody who really understood technology. They needed a team that really understood things like linked open data, how that works in the education space. They needed people to really understand collections, how all the collection management systems work, who understand information architecture, metadata, and who are also really visual. And so knowing how to work with cultural institutions to activate knowledge, to activate kind of these stories in a way that like resonates emotionally and intellectually with people. And so so they actually ended up reaching out to us and said, you're kind of this Swiss Army knife that we really, really need for this project because we need also the strategy. And so we partnered with them from the very beginning.
Yeah, I feel like the art world has, it's been kind of slow in technology development, honestly, until maybe like recently, like in the last decade or so. But I feel like as an industry, it was like one of the slowest ones to really pick up on the technology.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think museums do an extraordinary job preserving knowledge, and they have these amazing archivists who we have so much respect for doing this really meticulous and difficult work of kind of getting accurate data, attaching data to artworks. And I think the challenge is that's a certain pace of work, and technology is like running much faster than that.
Yeah.
And the tension is always, how do you kind of bring these two things together? Yeah. And so I think cultural institutions are kind of have really come around. I also think the pandemic made people like accelerated a lot of this work and also led to a lot of innovation in how kind of cultural institutions work with technology, because when we were all home, you know, they really realized like we truly need to be a borderless institution. And our mission is not just having people at the museum. Our mission is also sharing knowledge with people and like sharing these works in kind of the broadest possible sense.
Yeah, I think technology in general is one of the best accessibility tools for anybody. Yeah. And I feel like it's a very democratic platform because it can reach various people of, you know, different races, economic and social backgrounds. So I think technology is really essentially really incredibly helpful to art institutions who want to make art accessible.
Yeah. And now it's really central to almost every institution we've worked with. It's really essential to their mission because it is about democratizing access to art, democratizing access to knowledge, you know. And so technology is so central to that because one thing that's we always find striking is whenever we have our initial kickoff meetings with institutions, we ask how many people come to the museum a year, and then how many people visit the website. And when you look at the engagement on websites, it's unbelievable. We're talking about 1 to 1,000 ratio, sometimes 1 to 5,000. And so you really see that these websites are becoming central to kind of their mission, and that they really see it as a digital home for their collections.
Yeah, 100%. Which leads me to the fact that, you know, in the past you've stated that the art world can feel exclusionary on many grounds: geography, accessibility, diversity, and more, which I completely agree. And we've just touched on that a little bit. How can art galleries transform visitor experiences and enable learning through digital innovation, in your opinion?
There's so many ways, and it really depends on the specific mission of an art gallery and museum. I think an art gallery versus a museum are slightly different because art gallery is more based around sales, and museum is, you know, sometimes their efforts are more towards like visitors to the museum, or they have kind of different missions. But I think definitely where we see technology making a huge impact is one, opening up the collections for all the things that are in warehouses, for all the things that people can't see in person. Now these works are coming out online, and it's not like some crappy image, like real high resolution works are being published online with accurate data. And that's key because there's so much junk online, like inaccurate information. In museums, what we're seeing on a metadata level with like linked open data, there's a bunch of initiatives to get real accurate information about artwork online and like high quality images. So that's one big thing. I think the second thing is really just activating art, because a lot of people will see an artwork and be moved by it for various reasons. You kind of have an emotional or visceral reaction to a work of art. But then there's all the context around it that's so fascinating. Like, why did this artwork make such a big impact? Who made it? What's their story? At the end of the day, like, these are all humans who are making works at a very specific place and time under a very specific economic, cultural, and political context. And those things impacted the work and impacted how they see the world. And when you think about art, art is really, it's a lens into seeing life another way. And so having that context can be really meaningful to people and help them have like a deeper engagement. And these websites and this knowledge can be, shared in a lot of different ways. Everything from, you have like Bloomberg Connects doing kind of audio guides, or you have now apps for museums that connect you directly with the work. You see a lot of really interesting things happening, even with social media, to kind of engage people with art in new ways. You see it through podcasts even, like Carnegie Hall recently launched a new podcast, kind of opening up their archives and telling or unpacking the stories around it. And through the website, which plays a huge role. It's kind of the center place for all this, the motherboard of all this information. And so you even see a lot of websites being used in incredibly innovative ways to kind of break down stories and share them with different platforms. So maybe the website has a long form writing, but there's ways that can be parsed up and shared across different platforms.
I read somewhere that I think it takes somebody 5 to 10 seconds to establish basically their opinion on an institution just by looking at their homepage.
Absolutely.
Which is wild.
It's crazy. It's important.
Yeah, very important. So please, people who are listening, take care of your websites and your visual brand identity. But speaking of that, who would you say are your favorite designers that you've looked to for inspiration before?
Oh gosh, there's so many design studios I greatly admire. There's so many. One, even historic studios. One is a studio called Lust that was based in the Netherlands. They have now since closed. But they were extraordinary. They worked with a lot of like kind of early computing. That was amazing. There was also, I'm continuously inspired also by another historic designer, Muriel Cooper. She was with the MIT Media Lab who had a strong vision for what design can be in this new era that we were entering, the digital era. In terms of contemporary studios, I'm a big fan of a studio in London called Graphic Thought Facility. I actually worked for them for a little bit. They do a lot of work with cultural institutions, people in the arts, the V&A. They work a lot with Vitra. And so I think they're doing an extraordinary job, especially with like cultural world building and art direction. So I'm a really big fan of them just for their craft. Yeah.
Well, speaking of leaders in the industry, in 2022, you were selected for Creative Review's Creative Leaders List, which celebrates global leaders advancing their field, which is incredible. How did that make you feel knowing that you're one of the top leaders in the field?
I was really surprised when they reached out to us, to be honest. It was totally unexpected. I guess I'm humbled. I feel humbled and honored. When I saw who else was on the list, I was just blown away. I mean, I just feel lucky to be in their company. And just felt honored.
Is it definitely like that, a little bit of, yes,
I
did
think
it.
yes, you did it, and also I think everybody, especially women, you always slightly have imposter syndrome because you
Yes.
just like check into work and check out at the end of
Yep.
the day, and you have your little life.
Yeah, that was
life,
definitely your validation.
Yeah, and so I thought, oh my gosh, like the work has a life of its own out in the world, and I didn't even fully realize it. So.
Yeah. So, but
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit about what a person who owns a design firm does, like day to day? What are your main responsibilities? What does it look like?
When we started out, the main responsibility is designing and building.
Yes.
I think as our studio has grown, it's still that. Like, we're still one of I feel like the very few design studios out there where the partners still design, but we are a partner-led, partner-driven studio. We go to all the meetings because we're crazy. And I think it's because we care so much about the work. So there's always time to design. I try to block out at least 2 to 3 hours a day for just deep work, whether that's designing, writing, doing strategy. And a lot of the work is just managing the team. And so a lot of management, I kind of approach it like an educator.
Okay.
Since I'm also a professor, I really see it as empowering people to do their best work. And so that's also a big component.
Yeah, I have to say one thing that I really loved about working with you guys is the fact that you and Casper were very much present from step one to the very end, which is very rare for leaders of, like a design studio to actually be that. Like usually they'll give your account to like an account rep and, they'll be the one following it. But the fact that you were very much in it, following the project and giving your honest opinions was, I feel like, really special.
Yeah. So we try to be involved and put a lot of love into every project.
Yeah, I definitely felt that when we were working together. What would you say is your favorite aspect of your job or the most rewarding?
I think there's several things. I think one is seeing the projects out in the world. Like, I love following the analytics. It's very nerdy. Like, after a project launches and see it always goes up.
Yeah.
Sometimes double, fourfold, fivefold. And it's really exciting to see that design plays a role in helping people connect to knowledge in new ways. And that we had played a small part in activating the mission of this organization. So I think that's really fulfilling. I think the second thing is just like continuing to be a part of a community of makers, of thinkers, of, we all go into the arts because we're passionate about it, and we think that art is profoundly, is meaningful. And so being able to be a part of that community to help advocate for it, to help it become more democratic, more open, I think is also really special.
Yeah. So on the flip side, what's the most challenging aspect of your job?
The most challenging aspect, I would say maybe stakeholder alignment.
Okay, fair.
Because sometimes a lot of the institutions we work with are very decentralized. They're either overly centralized, where there's one person making all the decisions, or they're very decentralized and there's like 8 different committees, and you have to kind of like, especially for the really large organizations, and it's kind of bringing everyone together into one vision for a project.
Oh yeah, I can't even imagine museums like the Met or the MoMA, like the amount of time it can make that, like, take them to make one decision because there's so many players and voices.
You'll go through easily 6 stakeholder meetings, and then you'll synthesize everything and then have one recap meeting. So sometimes that can be challenging.
Yeah. I think the sweet spot is like a medium-sized institution where you just have like a team of enough people where you can get stuff moving quickly. Fair. Okay, so now I want to ask you, before we move on, what is a project that you're looking forward to completing or that you want to complete?
There's a project that we're working on for the University of Michigan. They have a lab called Singing Justice, and we're gonna hope, knock on wood, we're gonna launch this by the end of the year, and we're so excited because it's completely different from the projects we typically do, which are these large institutional projects. It's we're working with a small team of people who are they're publishing a textbook on the history of Black music in America. And the way they did this really innovative thing in the book where they chose about 14 songs that they think tell the history of Black music. And it's because there's this long history of like resampling of kind of key songs that come up again and again, different musical traditions that are housed within certain songs that have been really significant. And so we're doing like a little music app, a web app.
That's awesome.
Kind of like that's supposed to be viral and sticky, and it has a bunch of YouTube videos, and then we're connecting like Beyonce to like early like blues music, and we're just like we're excited to see it come out, because what we're doing is we're basically taking one song and then you can backtrack through its entire history using video.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
So it's like you take Hound Dog, Big Mama Thornton, and you see how Elvis then interpreted the song, and then moving forward. And so you can kind of backtrack through the history of each song.
Talk about archiving. That's incredible. You can literally like see the history of something, like its progression.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an incredible project. But on top of, being owning or being part of Synoptic Office, you are also an associate professor of communication design at Parsons School of Design, where you served as the chair of the school curriculum committee, program director, and associate director of the BFA communication design program, also for around 12 years. Tell me, is it important for you to also be an educator?
It is. And people, I get this question a lot. They're like, why are you in education?
Yes.
And
why?
It's because I see our practice as being part research, part like client-based work. And I think teaching has actually made, at least for me, it has made me a better designer. And I think it's because when I was just designing, I'm so on the hamster wheel of like trying to like get every project out the door. And teaching, what it does is it gives you the space to learn. And you think it's just you teaching students, but you also learn so much from students, because we are in the field of cultural dialogue. And so I'm learning so much about how they consume information, how they learn. And another thing about teaching that I love is that education by nature is always looking 5 years out, 10 years out. Like we're always asking, especially a great school like Parsons, like what is the future of design? Because if you think about it, by the time our students graduated, it will have been 4 years. That's almost half a decade. And like the design world has already changed. Yeah. And so we're always trying to teach for the future. And I feel like a lot of Synoptic Office is solving challenges for today. And so being able to like see things from two perspectives has just been amazing. And it just gives me a little space to learn, because a lot of my job now is less about teaching, but it's more about trying to like help orient our programs to the future of our field. And so it means organizing like a symposia on AI's impact on design or publishing. And these things just like help me connect with thought leaders around the world, and just try to stay sharp. And to also just always have a learner's kind of mentality, because our field changes so quickly. I feel like if you're just like heads down working, it's hard to stay current. And this is just a great way for us to always keep our eye on the future.
Yeah, you have like a built-in demographic to test when you're teaching. But I'm glad that you mentioned on technology's rapid kind of change. Because I remember when you were designing the website for Magazino, something that you said to me that really stuck with me, like even moving forward for me, is the fact that when you were building the website, you were thinking about how the world of technology might look in 10 years and how people will interact with this website even 10 years from now.
Absolutely.
Which is incredible, because like you don't want to be like changing your website, every year and upgrading it. So you have to think way ahead to save money that way.
Absolutely. So a lot of the work we do is even strategizing. Like what do you do with 10 years? And so a lot of the bulk of the work that we do is actually behind the scenes, like behind like a beautiful design. It's all the data work. And it's because technology is changing so fast. So what we help a lot of institutions do is actually future-proof their data. And so like we can't put it into some system that's going to come down in 3 years and then it's going to take 5 years to input all the new data. We just can't work that way. And so what we do is we kind of work with them to kind of figure out what do you need today? What do you need tomorrow?
Yeah, you were
Mhm.
definitely thinking about what we might be wanting to do in
Yeah.
like 5 to 6 years from
Mhm.
now, which is great because, you
Mhm.
know, a lot of us, since we're managing so many things
Mhm.
at once, it's hard to think so far ahead because you're kind
Yeah.
of just like, I need to get to
Yeah.
like October or
Yeah.
November. Like I
Mhm.
need to just get there because we have so
Uh-huh.
much stuff to do. But that's a great way to really,
Mhm.
you know, think ahead to be sure that you're not redoing everything, you know,
Yeah.
yearly, saving money,
Yeah.
especially, you know, art institutions have
Absolutely.
tight budgets.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's really critical.
Yeah, definitely. And there's tons of things you can do to preserve data and keep changing the front end, you know, so that you could both walk slow and fast at the same time.
Exactly. But why
Mhm.
did you go into teaching? That's what I really want to know because you obviously love
Yeah.
design. You open up
Mhm.
your design studio,
Mhm.
but why did you want to be a teacher in the first place?
You know, I come from a family of educators, so
Okay.
maybe I have a built-in bias that, you know, teaching is like, I've always grown up, you know, being told that teaching is like a really meaningful thing to do. And
Which it is.
I'm a true believer, but I think it almost happened by accident. What happened was I was working in London at the time, and my old program director at Yale had asked me to come back and teach an undergraduate course. It was an intro to design course. And I thought, that sounds like so much fun. And I was getting ready to move back to New York to work anyway. And so I just taught that one class and I really loved it. I really loved it. And then one thing led to another. I've taught in different capacities, part-time, you know, full-time. And so, yeah, I just realized that it helped me become a better designer.
Yeah.
And it also, the amazing thing about a university space and about Parsons is that there's an extraordinary community of makers there. Like I always feel so blessed to like be plugged into that because it's not just design, it's like artists, it's fashion designers, it's architects, it's people who work in, you know, social justice, people who do civic work. And so you see the whole gamut and it's just like really amazing to be in kind of the middle of all of these discussions.
Yeah.
So I feel really lucky to be at Parsons, especially also they're just being based in New York and really being at the cross currents of kind of all of these thinkers and makers.
Yeah, Parsons is definitely one
Um,
of the best art and design schools.
um,
But even for me personally, like there was a handful of teachers along the way in my life
Yeah.
who literally changed the
Yeah.
trajectory of
Mhm.
what, because I was originally pre-med
Mhm.
and then I changed into art and
Mhm.
my life would have looked completely different if I didn't,
Yeah.
you know, follow their advice or, you know, if they weren't there. And I'm eternally
Absolutely.
grateful to them
Mhm.
because, you know, these people, teachers literally have such a
Yeah.
huge impact on your life that
Mhm.
to the point where they can literally change the course of it.
Absolutely. I mean, were your parents shocked when when
Yeah, I
you-
mean, they weren't happy because they come from an immigrant family who are like,
Yeah.
you have to be a doctor or a lawyer.
I'm
But
also from an immigrant family, so I think
So
they
you know.
were shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I ended up going into design.
but I'm happy that I did
Mhm.
because I get to do something that I love every single day of my life.
Yeah. And so same for me, like I just feel grateful because like, you know, I get to do something every day that I love.
Yeah.
And you know what more can you ask than to do work that you love with people that you really care about
Yeah.
and like respect and admire. And so you know, running a design studio and teaching for me, it's just like lifelong learning. And so I just feel so fortunate to be able to do that.
Yeah, I feel like you're learning every single day.
Yeah, every day, like even now, like Casper and I always joke, we're like we're the student actually,
Yeah.
like because you know AI is totally turning over the design world, and like we're like training our own AIs right now so that we can have a deeper understanding of how everything works. We like have our little data sets and
Yeah.
and we're training it to see if like we can create our own tools for how we make, and it's just the learning never ends.
Speaking of
Yeah.
learning, have you learned anything from your students with every new generation that you teach? Something that you've
Yes.
just continued taking?
You know, it's
with
so
you?
funny. When I first started teaching, I was like, I'm just like them. Look, like I totally get them. And like every year I'm like, oh, look at these children. You know, my classroom, I
It
realize
changes.
it changes over time. I'm like, wow, I'm getting older. But what I've learned about them is I've learned a lot about how they consume information. I've also learned a lot about like what the cultural dialogue is today, and like how they understand art, engage with art. Like, it's just so fascinating to me because we have these long discussions and I'm like, oh wow, we see things differently. And
Yeah.
like I could learn something by like putting myself in your shoes and like seeing things as you do. And so yeah, I've been learning a lot from them about like publishing and how they read and where
Yeah.
they get their information from.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, for the longevity of any kind of industry, you
Yeah.
really have to be in tune with
Yeah.
the incoming generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also see how much it changes. Every 2 years, it's something different, you know? And so I'm always just like intrigued by that. You know, how much do they consume on TikTok versus Instagram versus Substack versus Arena?
Mhm.
How are they curating their own information? How are they learning? And so that's always evolving.
But you touched a little bit on AI.
Mhm.
What do you think the future of AI means to the design industry? Or what have you seen happening?
You know, I say this with a lot of humility because it's changing literally every day. And you have a range of voices saying it's not going to change that much. And it's like apocalyptic, like we're going to have artificial general intelligence and nobody will have a job and we're going to have universal basic income because we're all unemployed. And like you see the whole range. If I were to make a guess, I think AI will become a tool like any other, like it's going to be an extraordinarily powerful tool, but it will become a tool that designers use. And I think this is a moment of reckoning for design because if we think of design as like doing 20 variations on a logo or, you know, these kind of rote tasks, then I think, of course, a lot of that can be automated. I think if we think of design as connecting communication to humans in meaningful ways, then that changes. You know, I don't think AI can solve everything. I really can't. I think you still need a human to ask the right questions, to ask how, to kind of assess how humans engage with technology, to kind of have an eye out for how they consume information, and to also ask the right questions. And so I think it will become a tool, and design has always, you know, reckoned with technology. Like, oh my gosh, I remember like when personal computing came out and we had Emigre and like everyone was starting to make these fonts and like the type director position was going away and people were like, it's the end of the world. And you realize that, you know, a lot of jobs are lost, but then also sometimes new jobs are created. And so I'm really curious to see where things go. And I'm curious to see how AI can actually support design and help automate some of the mundane tasks so that we can focus on the bigger challenges.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said that because, you know, as you mentioned, yes, jobs are lost, but new jobs are created
Yeah.
depending on how we use these new tools,
Yeah.
which I think is going to be critical with AI.
Yeah. And I think, you know, AI, it's like right now, a lot of designers are using it for things that are kind of basic, like using Midjourney to make an image or to storyboard, or you think of Canva, they have like they're rolling in a lot of AI features, you know, for slide decks or, you know, to apply basic branding. But I think design is actually a lot bigger than that. It's not just the visual side, even though that's a part of it, but I see designers as making things that are beautiful and expressive, but that are also purposeful. And so I think I'm not seeing yet how AI can do that. That could, I say this with total humility, that could change, but I still like to believe that there's a role for a human in all of this and a human to ask, you know, how can technology communicate and reach other people in meaningful ways?
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's hope. Otherwise, we're all doomed. And
Otherwise,
that's it.
you know, we're all doomed.
Yeah. But let's backtrack a little bit to your education because
Yes.
you touched on a little bit on Yale. But you hold an MFA in graphic design from Yale and a BFA from the Rhode Island School of Design. Can you
That's
tell us
correct.
a little bit about how your studies reinforced what you do today?
Yeah, you know, I studied kind of product design undergrad, and my first job out was in Italy. I was working as a luxury furniture designer.
Okay.
And I remember my boss at the time was like, the future of design is interdisciplinary. And he was yes and no. And so I ended up at the very last minute applying to only one graphic design program, and that was Yale. I had already applied to 3 product design programs. And miraculously, I got in and was into this 3-year program for people who have a design background in something else other than graphic design specifically. And it was a life-changing experience. I think what I realized is that I was so much more interested in designing ideas than I was in designing things.
Mhm.
And I found the breadth and of the graphic design world to be really inspiring, right? It's like when you think about our work visualizing communication, I mean, that's so broad and there's so many touch points. It could be everything from immersive projection, AR, VR, websites, it's everywhere, print material, branding, it's everything. And so I found that to be really exciting. And this idea that a designer could have a vision, and it's almost like being a conductor in an orchestra, right? It's like, how do you kind of create this vision across all these different touch points to make like one big, beautiful, symphony. And so,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I work obviously in comms, and that's like something, like you mentioned, it's kind of like an orchestra.
Yeah.
You're the director because you have all these little points like
Mhm.
marketing,
Yeah.
social media,
Mhm.
website, branding, like
Uh-huh.
all of these things that you need to
Mhm.
make like come together to
Yeah.
form this one cohesive vision.
To have this one beautiful piece of music, right?
Exactly.
And like they all have different roles. You
Yeah.
have the violinist, you have the percussion, and like everything has to come together under one vision.
What
Mhm.
would you say is one important thing that you really took away from your studies that you carry with you till today?
I think the best piece of advice I got was just to keep learning.
Okay.
And
Which you do.
yeah,
Clearly.
But it's because you realize design is changing every day, and if you are not like growing with it, you will be left behind.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest thing. And I think the other big thing is just to take time and space to like open your eyes and see the world. Because I think it's so easy for us to be like heads down in our work, but you can get inspiration from everywhere, the arts, music, just conversation.
Yeah.
And so to kind of approach life in that way, with your eyes and heart wide open.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually a great thing to carry with you. You mentioned that one of the first classes that you taught
Mhm.
after you graduated
Mhm.
was Intro to Design
Uh-huh.
at Yale. And then you were also a visiting assistant
Mhm.
professor of graphic design at SUNY
Mhm.
Purchase
Mhm.
for about a year.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about your first early experiences with teaching?
It takes practice to be a
Okay.
good teacher. And so I realized, I'm like, how hard could it be? You just like come into the classroom and like talk.
Yeah.
And I realized it's an actual art. And it's like, I think I realized that teaching is not like a master apprentice model. It's not like you just float in there and be like, you guys need to know XYZ. There's a little bit of that. But most of teaching, I think, it's actually the inverse of that, where you're empowering the student to learn. And that's where I think teaching is really kind of an art and a craft. It's like, how do you inspire people to learn and like build that community in the classroom, help them to open their eyes and their art to these new ideas?
Yeah.
How do you do that? And so I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that teaching is actually hard. Being a good teacher is really hard.
Amen. Honestly,
Mhm.
some of my friends are teachers and I'm just like, I don't know how you do it, but thank you for your service
Thank you.
because I mean, I don't know who else can do these jobs.
Oh my gosh, I've gone and like helped out in my son's like kindergarten class, and I thought his teacher, she was brilliant,
Yeah.
and that she's doing God's work.
Seriously, teachers
I
are
don't know.
heroes. I'm not even like, people are like paramedics, firefighters,
Yeah.
police officers. Yes, they are heroes,
Yeah.
but so are teachers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for
Like-
sure.
Mhm.
Then when you graduated, you also worked as a senior designer at Base Design.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about your time there?
Yeah, I mean, Base Design is an awesome studio. They work primarily in branding. They have offices in Brussels, in Geneva, and in New York. So I was there managing a little team of designers, and we did a lot of work in the cultural space. And so it was from the brand perspective, which I found really exciting. And it was just a great place for me to sharpen my skills, just visually, with a international community of designers in that studio who are really good at what they do. And I think I kind of rotated out because I was, at the time, they were still doing more like print work, and I was much more interested in kind of like digital products and how design was kind of being used in these different ways online.
And that's also where the seeds of Synoptic
yeah, and
already
the seeds,
started.
yeah, our Synoptic were kind of there, and so we were like, let's just like start taking on freelance projects and like
Yeah.
doing our own thing and seeing what happens.
Where did you meet Casper?
In grad school.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
you've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we I was in the 3-year program. He came into the 2-year program because he had an undergraduate degree in design. And it's funny because I remember his interview because they also have like current students
Okay.
interview. And so I was like, oh, he was really nice. And towards graduation, our director, Sheila DeBretteville, was like, you guys should work together one day. And we were like really
Look at that, a
surprised by that.
teacher.
I know, a teacher changing our lives.
Yes.
And so we were like, oh, why? And she was like, you just have really complementary skill sets. And so it kind of stuck with us. And so when we graduated, he was like, we just like connected. We were like, hey, do you want to take on this project together? And then I don't know if our intention was for it to ever become this like big thing. It just happened organically. One project just led to another and another and another. And before you knew it, we were like a real
You're
studio.
everywhere.
Yeah, we were a real studio.
Yeah. No, Synoptic is honestly everywhere. A lot of people that I talk to, especially obviously in the arts, obviously know of Synoptic Office, and I recommend you guys all the time.
Thank you.
So anyone listening who's looking for great web designers or just designers, please hit up Synoptic.
Thank you so much.
Because you were not only super knowledgeable, but you're incredible to work with.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was such a terrific experience.
Likewise, we're big fans of Magazino, and you are a total badass. I don't know.
Thank you.
Like I said, she, Carolina was publishing. She was commissioning videos. I don't know, running the whole ship.
Yeah, just everything.
Yeah.
No, but I hope that obviously in the future we still get to work on
Absolutely.
100 more projects
I
together.
would love that.
Okay. So I also wanted to touch on the fact that you also speak internationally
Yeah.
at places like the Biennale of Design in Ljubljana and the Palazzo Mora in collaboration with the European Cultural Center and the Venice Biennale. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and kind of what topics you feel warrant further thought and consideration in the design industry?
I think there are several things. I think one big thing and there's been more of this recently, but like, what does it truly mean to design in a global context? And I think a lot of people are answering this in different ways, but multilingual design, all of this, designing for cultural contexts, like specific cultural contexts. I think I would love to see more discussion around that. Also, continued discussion around kind of collections and how like all these institutions that are tasked with housing this extraordinary treasure trove of knowledge, I would love to see continue conversation around that. Like, what is their responsibility just to society, and then how can design kind of help serve and empower these spaces even more?
Yeah, those are definitely great thoughts. And then before we head into our fire round of questions, I wanted to ask you the 2 big questions that I ask all my guests. One of which
My
is,
goodness.
have you faced any challenges in particular as a woman working in the design field?
I think the answer is yes. I think the biggest thing is, and I'm sure other women have said this, is if you look a little bit young and you are a woman, sometimes the C-suite does not take your expertise seriously. And so it's easy to be dismissed. And so, yeah, that's been a challenge. But I think there's ways, to not be intimidated by that, but to continue to just know that you have something to say and that you have something to offer, and to continue to put your ideas out there.
100%. And some of my guests have actually said that too. And then do you have any sort of advice for incoming generations of women who are looking to work in design?
I think just stay curious, stay active, and know that the community is actually really small.
Mhm.
And so what I realized is, and maybe it's because I'm a professor at Parsons and we have so many people teaching there, it's just like the design world is actually not that big. In New York, I mean, a few thousand people. And like, if you really think about it as like 6 degrees of connection, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
And just continue to connect with people, to ask advice, to not be shy. I think the design community in New York is generous. I think that they care about education and mentorship, and that they will give you advice. They will help you make connections. So just don't be shy. Reach out, connect with people. Yeah, and like just continue to have a learner's attitude.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's interesting that you said that this is the design community small because, often we think of New York as this big city, right?
Mhm.
But the art world and obviously now
Mhm.
the design community that you mentioned are actually so small that
They're so small.
you don't realize it until you start working in and you're like,
Uh-huh.
there's like 5 people here.
Yeah, a lot of these institutions, you're like, oh my gosh, it's this big museum. And then you realize they have like 5 very overworked people
Yep.
like running the whole show. And we see it time and time again. It's literally 3 to 5 very tired people like making this museum run.
Yep, I can vouch for that. Because I've worked in
Yeah.
museums and various institutions in the
Mhm.
art world. So that is 100%
Mhm.
on the nose. Okay, so let's get to our 5 round of questions.
Okay.
So I will ask you to pick a number
Uh-huh.
between 1 and 10,
Okay.
and then I will read the corresponding question to you.
Okay. 4.
4. Okay. What is a passion project that you want to complete in your life?
Ooh, a passion project. We have one that's ongoing called the Chinese Type Archive that
Okay.
we really want to like bring to the next level. So it's an archive of Chinese typefaces, and it's all like historical typefaces. And the next step is talking about contemporary Chinese typography. This is a more challenging thing because in order to put visual assets up, you need image rights clearance.
Oh, yes.
And so, but we think it would be an extraordinary resource. So that's
Yes.
a passion project, talking about the design in East Asia in general, especially in China. And so we would love
Yeah.
to make that happen in the next couple years.
That's incredible. You're always like thinking of these big projects.
I know,
Look
'cause
at
we're
you, just
crazy.
reaching for the stars.
Or it's just crazy. I don't know.
Either or, but you're making it happen. That's all that's important. Okay, let's do another question. Pick a number.
7.
7. What is something that you think everyone should experience in their lifetime?
Something everybody should experience. Oh my goodness. Falling in love.
Oh, I like that. No, that's true.
Is that cheesy?
No,
It's
I
the first
like
thing
it.
that came to mind, and I'm like, forget design. This is about life.
Yeah.
I think yeah.
Yeah, a
I-
lot of people answer these
Mhm.
questions obviously with life experiences,
Yeah.
and I think that's obviously a universal truth where I feel like everyone needs to experience that at some point in their life.
Because like design, I love design. It's my passion, but I love my family even more. And I
Yeah.
think, they really put, like, I have 2 small children now, and it puts a lot of things into perspective.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
yeah, just like it kind of frames how I want to show up in the world. And, they're watching me. And
Yeah.
so I think motherhood has really changed me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're also building a future for them
Yeah.
to live in.
Yeah, you think about what type of world you're leaving for them. And,
Yeah.
something somebody told me is, don't ask yourself, am I a good parent? Ask yourself, am I the type of person I want my kids to be one day? Because they actually just model their parents. And I thought, oh my God, like
Yeah.
that really like struck me. So I think having a big love and, has been like my I think my great life experience.
I feel like motherhood is also teaching.
And
There you
motherhood,
go.
yeah, it's definitely humbling.
Built-in teacher.
I know. And it teaches you to be patient.
Oh, I can imagine. Okay, one
Uh-huh.
last question. Pick a number between 1 and 10.
9.
9. What do you always travel with?
What? A sleep mask.
Okay.
I know. I know I'm a grandma now, and the older I get, I'm like more and more sensitive to like changes in environment, and like I can't sleep when I travel.
Oh, I can't
So,
either. Forget jet lag. I
Yeah.
won't be sleeping for like days.
Yeah, I sleep really like a grandma with a eye mask and earplugs.
Listen, you know what? Do what you got to do. Whatever makes you happy. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It was just an honor to be here.
This was such a lovely conversation.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you for sharing your experiences and your
Uh-huh.
wisdom, because you have a ton of it. And thank you to all my viewers for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.